Welcome to the Talking HealthTech podcast. My name is Peter Birch. Today on the show, I'm joined by Ricardo Herreros-Symons from Speechmatics. G'day, Ricardo. How you going?
Yeah, pretty well, thanks. The energy levels that went up there was great. Yeah, delighted to be here. Don't know if I'd be sort of hitting that energy at 6 o'clock, but yeah, feeling great.
Actually, that's a common thing. I do all these prep work with people prior to a conversation, and I'm like, yeah, cool. All right, let's go. And then it's podcast Pete into the swing. But looking forward to diving in and having a chat with you about speech recognition and its role within healthcare AI and unpacking some of those terms. It's a pretty hot topic at the moment, but I'm liking the direction that we've talked about for this particular discussion. So, Ricardo, firstly, for those unfamiliar, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what you do in Speechmatics? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure thing. So name's Ricardo, as you mentioned, Chief Strategy Officer at Speechmatics. I've been with the business for 11 years. But basically, first company I worked for straight out of uni. My one rule is that I can do any role as long as it doesn't involve touching the code. If I touched the code, we would not be here today. We'd have been liquidated years ago. Background was basically spent far too many years at university studying sort of European medieval literature, sort of a really good one to get into the tech space. But spent so many years there that I thought I'd give the boat race a go, sort of the Cambridge Oxford thing. Didn't quite manage to get the victory we wanted there, but as part of it, discovered Speechmatics, which is sort of like a one person band. Got involved with them, commercialized sort of their engine in 2014, our engine, and since then sort of just been rolling forward. So we focus on speech to text primarily. We do other stuff now as well, but the goal has always been to give the absolute highest quality speech to text you can across loads of different languages, multiple accents. Making sure that we're getting all of that difficult vocabulary in there, and essentially solving the hard problems. So we're very English about it in terms of it's very academic. Let's make this very good. Let's make this sort of high quality. Sort of maybe don't sort of blow our own trumpet enough. But nonetheless, it does mean that when people work with us, they get a foundation that is really, really strong.
Yeah, super interesting. And I guess that concept of speech to text is not new and also not something that's just relevant in healthcare. So been in this space for a while and across multiple industries as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So healthcare is not really an industry we got into until about a year and a half ago. Sort of historically, the rule in speech to text was avoid areas where nuance play. Essentially nuance, drag and dictate. There be dragons here kind of thing. Avoid the dragons because they had a bit of a history of if you were a new speech company coming up, sort of suddenly litigation would appear and sort of it all got a little bit funky. So that was the rule of thumb. And then obviously players like Amazon, Google, Microsoft entered the fray, and that sort of really brought the market open. So I remember 2016, sort of I saw all of these companies releasing their speech models and I thought, right, that's curtains for us. But we managed to sort of stay ahead and sort of really focus, as I say, on those difficult problems. But healthcare really became something that was a pull, not a push. Because what we found is that a year or two ago, people started coming along and using our engine for ambient scribing, among other use cases. And we didn't even have a medical model at that point. We have a model that's really big, as in we probably put 10x the number of words into our lexicon or dictionary, which means we did really well on medical, but it wasn't a medical model per se. And then it was only at that point that we got to the pull into the medical space. But yeah, traditionally Speechmatics has been media, it's been contact center, it's been live captioning on TV, defense, government. It really is a sort of a horizontal platform in that sense.
Interesting. And the on the point of, I guess I think in healthcare and historically pre-generative AI, large language models and the ambient scribe kind of world that we live in now, it's pretty common for a specialist to pick up their, dictaphone and record something into a thing, and either a poor secretary or someone would type the thing up after listening to it, and then or there's some kind of tool in order to do that. We obviously have fast tracked to where we are now in 2025, and there's different players out there that clinicians. What I find interesting about the AI scribe space, in inverted commas, in healthcare is a lot of these tools aren't so much being pushed down from the top within a healthcare system and telling clinicians you need to use this thing. It's very much coming from bottom up, because clinicians are like, this feels like a really big problem to me, and I've found something that actually is addressing the issue here. So in terms of how people might engage with Speechmatics, is it something like at a front end that they're dealing with a Speechmatics app, or how does that work in healthcare?
Yeah, I'll jump into that in a segment. What you say is really interesting, because traditionally healthcare moves pretty slowly. So at least in this country it does. So it is also, technology is really good when it's being forced in sort of from the way up. And the reason that's happening is because historically all the dictation software you had, it was always speaker dependent. So I'd get an engine and I'd have to say, train it on your own voice, and then it will eventually get better. And that's because it just wasn't good enough. Whereas now we could transcribe this conversation and get an absolutely awesome transcript out of it. The way people would engage with Speechmatics is we're a little bit more behind the scenes. So we spend all of our time focusing on solving the problem, which is, how do I make sure that word that appears has the highest probability of being right, being at the right time, knowing who said it, knowing how it was said, and getting all of that information together. Now, that is a problem that can take 30 machine learning engineers all of their time to focus on, and beyond that as well. And then you can get into text to speech and sort of everything else beyond that too. But the fundamental is that if you want to do it really well, you need a lot of people continually thinking about that problem. And as such, the way we work in the ambient scribe market is we don't go directly to sort of the clinicians. We might sell to an EMR, but we don't offer like a scribing product ourselves. What we do is we will look at the ambient scribers themselves, or the EMR companies themselves, and we'll say, look, your job is good technology sells on three things. It's good visibility, ease of use, and high quality. We're saying on the transcription, which is essentially the bed of everything, if that's good, everything downstream can work. But garbage in, garbage out, right? So we're saying, let us focus on making that transcript as good as humanly possible, or AI-ly possible, and then get everybody else to focus on how they can orchestrate it, making it really easy to use for clinicians, getting it into the right into the right formats, making sure they've got all the sort of specific country specific again, formatting, box filling, whatever it might be. And that just allows for a better experience overall. And it's really important, because you think about it, like healthcare is that one industry where one word wrong is just, it is life or death. And so we feel that we've got to it's our duty to spend so much time focusing on that initial piece, to then allow everything else to be delivered downstream from it.
That's interesting. I like that saying, actually. I'm probably going to steal that. They're good as not as good as humanly possible, but AI-ly possible. That's cute. But the on that though, thinking about what I've heard people talk about, how I guess the difference now in this world of large language models or generative AI is that it's not just doing what would happen in the olden days, where it's like it's trying its best to listen to what was said in whatever particular accent, but hey, words are going to get jumbled up. But there's a bit more kind of, I guess, intelligence or thinking behind what goes on with the AI to then go, well, it sounds like this, but in amongst everything else going on, it probably was this, so I'm going to chuck that in there. So that is certainly clever, but also brings kind of new risks, I guess, or a lot of kind of trust me, bro, is what I'm saying at the moment, is where it's kind of like the AI has said it. So, and in healthcare, it's not like we've got a lot of trust to spend willy-nilly. So I imagine this is your kind of day-to-day about, like you said before, getting the quality right. Is that I'm on the right path here?
Yeah, and I think the trust me bro bit, I mean, we do that as humans a bit as well, because even as I'm speaking, right, you're processing what I'm saying, and you're processing based on various different inputs. One of them is the word you're hearing, and like that's what you're using it mainly for, but you're also like taking in what my lips are doing as part of it, and also how a normal sentence goes. For example, if I say sort of I really like working in healthcare pie, like your brain's going, no, he means healthcare AI, right? And that supposition is what our speech recognition models do as well. They're taking all of these different inputs and essentially adding them together to get that best possible sort of outcome. And that sort of element of what the next word is what our language model does. What's interesting is that we were doing large language models back in 2014 as part of speech recognition. But now you've got this extra layer coming in where there's an LLM coming on top of stuff, which is actually in some cases doing a lot of correcting around transcription too. But therein you do start to get the challenges, because if you've got an LLM correcting something, then you're getting further away from what the source of truth might be. Now, actually, the data shows that the LLMs do a good job, but you've still got to have that sort of that verification piece afterwards. And so the way we think about what we're doing is, this is not a replacement for humans. In no way is it a replacement for humans. It's a way to enable them to be more efficient with their time. So instead of having to write all the notes at the end, it's the notes are being done during. You can review them at the end. You know what your key outcomes are. Like the key outcomes are sort of the key symptoms, the medication, whatever it might be. But you haven't had to do sort of the extra bit in between that, which means you can see 3 more patients a day. Or it means that you can actually take some time to rest your brain and do a better job on those other patients that you have there.
I think we underestimate that. Well, maybe we don't, because it's due to the popularity, but that cognitive load of writing back out what is in my head, and also depending on the level of technical capability of the individual, like typing, but there's a lot of variables in the middle between getting it out of someone's head and putting it into the computer, and I see the value in doing that in a more efficient way.
And it's not a core skill, right? To be sorry to interrupt. It's not a core skill to being a healthcare, as in when you do your doctor's exams or your vet exams or whatever it might be. It's not about how quickly you can type or how well you dictate stuff. That's sort of something that just comes as you hope that it comes with it. And obviously, that most humans are able to do that, but it's essentially taking the stuff that is not on that critical path to making you really good at your job.
Yes, 100%. What's interesting is then, your shift into the healthcare landscape, and as you say, it's that kind of being pulled into it by demand, I guess. But there's a lot of interesting words in healthcare, and a lot of, like, when we're talking before about what is naturally kind of like in a natural sentence, we know when there's a word kind of out. I've seen doctors take notes, and I've seen how their brains work, and there's a lot of stuff comes out, and they're pretty good, to be fair, and there's a structure, but often, you can't just rely on everyone being super structured. And I guess one of the benefits of ambient scribing is it could be a bit all over the place, but then it structures it for you. In coming from outside of healthcare into it, how do you even begin to, build and have the confidence to then say, hey, we've got a really robust model for this?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the confidence, there are sort of a public test sets that you can use. You'll do things like word error rates, so what the accuracy is. But ultimately, there's no better feedback than your customers, right? And the great thing is that because we sell to the scribers themselves, they generally have big test sets of what work, and they can give us a very sort of objective evaluation of how good things are. But in some ways, healthcare it's an awesome one for us to go after, because it represents a difficult problem. As in a normal sort of broadcast media use case, sort of, if you've got a good mic, mine's okay, sorry about that, sort of you can get like a 98% decent transcript if you're talking about simple things. But healthcare's got a ton of really funky words in it. It's got a ton of acronyms, and so it represents like more of a challenge to do well, but in some ways that actually favors it. I mean, take an example, like if you were to if you to, so let's say in layman's terms, talk about having scraped your hand on some sandpaper because it was in your pocket, right? That might just be like a little bit of some redness, some maybe some bruising, so a little bit of bleeding, right? But then if you go into like the healthcare element of that could be like excoriation, denudation, sort of like subcuticle, whatever. And sort of that terminology doesn't appear in sort of the most commonly said things. So what you want to do is you want to be taking that base language model and sort of focusing it on one, making sure those words are in there, which is a challenge for some systems, and two, making sure that you're essentially saying this is healthcare context. So like have that in your mind and always trend towards the acronym or whatever might be the correct one there.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that was a subtle dig towards the Australian cricket team there with the sandpaper.
No, not at all. The Ashes is not coming up in a couple of months. I hope Pat Cummins has a great recovery.
I heard that. But no, anyway, it was a good example nonetheless. We've moved on from that, Ricardo. Now, so the thinking then about, so one of the powers as well that exists in relation to some of these tools is the ability to then repurpose content from into multiple languages and from multiple languages as well. Talk to me about like how this works with languages.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things about languages is that if you look at most speech recognition use cases for in general, so many of them are in English because despite sort of being in many different countries, the international language of work is generally English, and so you see this like 90% English, and then the rest is a long tail of languages. The great thing, I mean, again, I say great because again, hard problems to solve is exciting things for me. The great thing about healthcare is that every consultation will be going on in the language of the country that you're in, primarily, as in consultations in Spain will be in Spanish or in the various sort of dialects they have there, in Germany and wherever this isn't named countries, but I sort of started running out on that list there. But as you can see, sort of it's always going to be, so there's going to be lots of languages to go there. In terms of translation, it's an interesting one. Translation is adding in another step because you're doing the transcription, which may get like 99% accuracy, and then the translation might get 99% accuracy. And so there will be a compounding of errors on that. But what is a bit of an interesting angle on it too is that obviously, because there is so much English data online, LLMs are particularly strong in English, which does mean that some of the tools around summarization or picking out the right categories and things like that, they work better in English than they do in other languages. And so I know some people who are considering transcribing ambient scribing doctor's notes in, let's say, French, translating them to English, summarizing them in English, and then translating them back to French because they think they'll get more veracity in the quality of the notes than they would otherwise. Now, obviously, that will change as LLMs improve, but for longer tail languages, it's going to be quite an interesting one to play into.
That's really fascinating. I like that, how different workflows kind of evolve and focus around the quality. So that, we've emphasized that the quality and that kind of ability to recognize healthcare language or the healthcare terminology is super important. But another really important factor too in healthcare is obviously the sensitivity of the data that's being transcribed and shared is super high. And so privacy and regulation all comes into play too. I imagine you're well versed in all of that now as well.
Yeah, it's sort of this is probably the bit of the podcast where you see all those sort of the listeners sort of drop off as we start going through different certifications for healthcare. Because ISO 27001 and HIPAA is all fantastic.
I think they dropped off when you made the sandpaper joke, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, you can delay it until the beginning of December, so mid-December, and then sort of pick your timing. No, but in all seriousness, obviously, it is a hugely important topic. The great news is that there are the various regulations to mean that this can be done online, but there are still countries, areas, places where that sensitivity is even greater. And so what we also offer in this place is we'll offer an on-premise solution, so one that runs sort of natively on the servers of whatever healthcare institution it is, or even on device is the way where this is going to, because so at the moment we have a couple of customers who for different use cases, but they'll download our engine and run it natively on their laptop. So the transcription only happens on the laptop, never goes to the cloud, never goes to any servers anywhere. We're doing sort of millions and millions of hours like that. But it becomes interesting in the ambient scribing space, because if you think about it, a company like Heidi, they'll be targeting doing 100 million hours a year of transcription, right? 100 million hours, even if you're using like a conservative price for the transcription itself, 20 cents maybe, I don't know, something like that per hour. Like nobody really wants to be spending 20 million hours on just transcription costs. I mean, I would love them all to do that, don't get me wrong, but the on-device play is great because you can actually, as once people get into these either really high security or really high volume use cases, you just put the transcription cost essentially onto the electricity of the healthcare professional. They're not noticing it because it's running on their machine, and none of us sort of thinks about how much electricity our laptop uses. But that is another way sort of to tackle the security angle. So certification route, but also sort of the running on premise. And the bit that, sorry, you've got me going now, like this real specialist subject. The bit that is going to be interesting in this space is it's different in different countries, but what people tend to find is that transcription, so audio into text, that is generally fine in terms of no extra certification needed. But as soon as something is done with that transcription, so as soon as you summarize it, as soon as you sort of pull out like key symptoms or put it into any particular format, that starts to move into the realm of the medical device. And if you're a medical device, you need, quite honestly, it can take 1 to, depending on the level of the medical device, like multiple years of trying to get accreditation for that. And so you're in this sort of funny space where these tools are incredibly powerful. And you can see from like a B2C sort of, as you mentioned, bottoms up perspective, they're making a huge difference. But actually, in order to get them properly certified, there is going to be a lot of red tape coming into it, and understandably so, because we want people to sort of to make sure that these engines perform consistently, because as I come back to, it's life and death. But it is an interesting little nuance that sort of is happening right now, where you get to a certain level of functionality, and then suddenly the regulation goes absolutely sky high.
Thinking about the direction that I guess building on that, thinking the direction that the ambient scribe space is going, more and more platforms like workflow solutions will incorporate the ability to do ambient scribing. And which means then a product that maybe a few years ago, a piece of software that was once positioned as an ambient scribe SaaS, is kind of like just a feature, not a product. It's kind of like almost like table stakes in order to have that capability within it. So I guess if I was taking the viewpoint of building a solution that's trying to optimize the workflow and integrate all these different bits and pieces, in the same way that if could be a bad example, we'll see how I go, but if you needed to incorporate mapping into your app, you're not going to go out and build a global view of the world so that you can do an accurate map. You're going to then plug in Google Maps or whatever tool. So am I hearing that right in that, as different solutions are built out, and if there's a requirement to be able to have that kind of speech to text or ambient AI capability in there, that's really the role that you play, because you just do nothing but focusing on this particular vertical?
Yes, and again, I mean, you open up sort of a much bigger existential question around sort of what sort of being close to like these foundational AI models, and essentially, I think the phrase is like flying close to the sun, right? You've got to constantly be innovating to keep ahead and making sure you're doing differences, and so that there are ways around that. So, like I would say, what was our traditional speech to text or scribing sort of use cases a few years ago, they have evolved for sure, because as some of them have become easy enough where good enough is fine, then you focus in different areas. Now, obviously, you can always focus on efficiency and speed and things like latency, but then you start to look into other elements of it too. So you start to look at sort of, again, like how things were said, sort of like, is there emotion in the text, but is there emotion also in the audio? Is that valuable? I mean, the long tail of that is you'd start to look into sort of, I'm sure you can train AI to detect sort of probably certain conditions or diseases from the change in tonality of somebody's voice, right? So we're focusing on trying to do everything that is audio related, which is speech first, but then sort of more audio, and how that can evolve. And so the one that we're currently looking at is a text to speech. So that has just launched. So that's the other end of it, so that it can talk for you. Obviously not in the ambient scribing that useful, but very useful for the sort of, if you're looking at efficiency for healthcare professionals, then you say, okay, great. This could actually book your meetings. It could take sort of primary consultations, to be honest. Because if you can have I mean, I don't know if you've spoken to many sort of voice AIs, but they can definitely, what you sort of want to do is, again, we're not looking to replace people, but what you're looking to do is essentially just reduce things like wait times. So would you rather be waiting for 10 minutes on the phone to talk, let's not say emergency services, but let's say here it's 111, which is sort of the non-emergency stuff, but you're calling up. Would you rather sort of wait 15 minutes, or would you rather speak to an AI which has a sort of context and give information, obviously with caveats, which might be able to solve your problem, until you sort of wait to speak to a professional at the end of it who will validate what the information that they've received? That is something that could be interesting too. So I totally agree with you. There's always sort of looking over your shoulder as to what's coming, but there are definitely more and more areas to innovate and evolve what you're doing. And in the healthcare space, I still think there's a long way to go to perfection.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned previously on the podcast, but the voice AI space is one that I initially assumed that the interest from clinicians would be lower. Like, that the scribing was great, but as soon as you're facing a patient, we don't want patients to speak to a bot in inverted commas. But the interest is certainly there, and I was proven wrong with that one. That there's a need, and that if there's a lot of pressure on the front end for clinics or health systems, that if something is really good, then and it solves an issue, then it's certainly got some legs in this industry. And it is, I often think about, not to get too existential, but culturally, in terms of how, things have evolved over time and expectations within the general public of, it's kind of, you're not offended anymore if you call up a call center and you listen to you might be mildly annoyed, but there's 5 different caveats prior to you're going to be recorded and it's going to do this and it's going to do that. And you're like, well, I know why that needs to happen. And then maybe you speak to an IVR or you have to press a button, and it's kind of like, it just becomes the norm. I'm interested over time, even outside of healthcare, whether as people are using large language models, they're using ChatGPT, they're using all the different tools in their day to day to suggest that people would be not okay with engaging with, say, a voice AI or some kind of tool there. To suggest that's the case, I think would be kind of a little bit short-sighted. So that's going to be super cool to watch as we start to kind of round out the conversation.
Just on that point really quickly. So what I think is quite interesting in that front is that there's been a lot of studies now that have shown that you start to segment the population demographically, quite often based on age, but into what type of AI they're comfortable talking to. So for some groups, you actually want it to sound as real as possible. Those who are used to sort of speaking to a human want it to sound real. But for a lot of people, they actually sort of too human is bad. Yes. Because they don't want to be tricked. So they want to know, as in that I'm perfectly comfortable that like I trust the AI technology, and so this is good. Especially if you've grown up natively, as in digital, sort of Gen Z and beyond, like they're totally fine with it. And so actually, it's not. I don't want to be tricked into speaking to a human. I want to be clear that it is an AI, but obviously like very responsive and very good. And so like that sort of bifurcation is an interesting one to look at.
Yeah, 100%. And like when it kind of goes with the vibe generally of healthcare too, if we can have that transparency and trust up front and build the tools that in the end are going to serve someone better, and let as I've said a number of times, let the humans do the humaning and let the computers do the computering. And that if we can be focused on the bits that we're better at, then that's got to be a good outcome for both. So long term, next steps for you and the direction it's going. What's on the horizon? What can we look forward to seeing?
Good question. I feel like making predictions in the future in the AI space is a very dangerous game. We used to sort of try and plan like 3 years out, and now it's sort of, okay, next 6 months, what is going on? So for us at the moment, we've had our best year for like sort of 4 years in terms of growth. So it's pretty exciting there. In the AI space, it's very much capture as much of this sort of scribing market as we can, and again, be the provider to the scribes, like enable them. And then use that as a platform to essentially start driving voice AI into the space too, because agents are coming, voice agents are coming, but they're not fully. I mean, we're still at the beginning of the curve there. So just make sure that we've got the relationships with the key providers to do that. And then more holistically as a business, it really comes down to sort of how fast we want to move. In terms of there are so many opportunities out there, so it's almost picking the right one. So there's very much a world in which we raise money in the first half of next year just to sort of push into a few more of those. But currently, things are growing nicely. Healthcare is really exciting, and I say we've been in it for a year, so we're not sort of absolute experts, but we feel that we bring a level of quality and focus on quality to it that enables us to do well. And so we're just excited to sort of keep sort of riding the wave.
And I could see a world where, by demonstrating the capability of the medical model within, an English-speaking space, then to be able to open that up into other parts of the world where perhaps access to healthcare, aren't as accessible, or also just, the ability to then reach more people, then that's surely got to be on the horizon as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as in transcribe in as many languages, as many accents as possible. And that's one of the areas actually where if you analyze our engine, we do really well. But obviously there are thousands of languages to transcribe. So being able to get to that point is crucial too. And I've just actually remembered, you said what's next. I will be sort of drawn over the coals if I do not mention that we have, of course, released our healthcare model that sort of that's coming out in further languages at Health in October in Vegas. And so yeah, that too, obviously, sort of having not just being a company that does well in healthcare, but a company that has actually specialized in it too, and hopefully will reap the rewards from that too.
Looking forward to it. It's a good place to launch that at too. So keen to watch with interest. Put the details for Speechmatics in the show notes of this episode. You'll find a listing on our website too as THD Plus company partners. So Ricardo, it's been lovely to chat, man. Looking forward to do it again soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Great to chat, and speak soon, as you say.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking HealthTech. Make sure you like and subscribe, and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.